So in this video, we're going to start to look at variables and variable declarations. Now, variables are basically containers for pieces of data, and that data can be one of many different types, and it's important to understand the different data types in JavaScript. So we're going to go over that in the next video. Now, when we declare a variable, we need to use one of three keywords. So let's just say ways to declare a variable. So basically we have var. Let's make sure we comment this out. So we have var, we have let, and we have const. Okay, so these are the three ways that you'll see variables declared in JavaScript. Now you probably won't see var very much anymore. Var was the original declaration, but in ES 2015, which is the 2015 update of JavaScript or ECMAScript, also known as ES6, it was a huge update to the language, and they introduced let and const. And the main reason for that is due to something called scope. And I'm not going to get too much into scope right now because it'll go over a lot of people's heads that are just getting started. We're going to have a whole section on function, scope, execution context, and stuff like that. But for now, just know that when you write code just write in the file, not inside of a function, not inside of an if statement. That's the global scope. All right. Now, in the global scope, var and let work in a very similar way. Now, const is a little different because it's for constants. It's for values that are not going to be reassigned at a later time. Okay, and I'll show you const in a few minutes, but let's start by just creating some variables here. I'm going to say first name, and let's set that to a string, so we do need quotes. So we'll say John. Now, notice I made this N capital, so basically the beginning of the second word I capitalized. I'll talk about that and some other ways you can format your variables in a few minutes. But let's say first name, we'll say last name, and set that to Doe. Okay, so we're just creating some strings, putting them into some variables, and we'll do a console log of first name, and we can log more than one thing, so we'll do that here as well. And you'll see we get John Doe. Okay, and if I wanted to create a variable with another data type, like a number, we could say let age equals 30. We can console log age. Okay, now if I try to log age up here, you'll see that I'm going to get an error. It says cannot access age before initialization. When we do this right here, let const var, this is initializing a variable. Okay, and you want to initialize it before you use it. Now it does act a little different if we use var. So if I say var here and I run this, we don't get an error, but you'll see that it is undefined. And this is due to something called hoisting, which is a little more advanced, and we'll talk about that at a later time. But yeah, you want to initialize your variables first. I'm just going to get rid of that. Now when it comes to naming your variables, there's a couple conventions that we need to follow. So variable names can only be letters, numbers, underscores, and dollar signs. Okay, so you can't have anything else. You can't have like a plus symbol or an asterisk or anything like that. And even though that you can have numbers, they can't start with a number. So if I were to say like let one name equals Brad, that's not going to work. I'm going to get an error. But if I move that one to the end here, then that's fine. But if I try to add like a plus sign or something like that, that's not going to work. Okay, now as far as the formatting of your variables for like multiple words, just paste this in here. What I did here with first name and last name, this is called camel case, where you start with a lowercase number for the first word, and then every other word after that is uppercase. Okay, so that's camel case, and that's usually what you're going to see. Now, you have other ways to do it, like you could use underscores to separate the words, which I don't particularly like, but I mean, it's all right, I guess. You see a lot of that in PHP. And then we also have Pascal case, where the first word is also uppercase. And there are conventions, or there are certain times where this is the convention, such as in React components or most front-end frameworks. When you create a component, the file name is Pascal case, so is the class or the function name of the component. And then you might see all lowercase, which I really don't like. I don't think that it's very readable, especially if you're getting into like 3 and 4 words. Okay, so let's look at reassigning variables. So we'll say reassigning variables. Now we have a variable up here of age. We use let. We set age to 30. So if I come down here, I can then take age and then I can reassign it to, let's say, 31. Let's say John had a birthday. And then we'll just console log age again, and now it's 31. All right. Now, another thing I can do with let is just simply declare it and not actually assign a value. So let's say we want a variable called score, but that's it. I'm just going to declare it. Okay, I'm allowed to do that. I don't get any error. And then I could take score and maybe add 1 to it. Let's do a console log of score. And we get 1. And then we might have like some kind of if statement. I'll just put true in here so that this runs. And don't worry if you don't understand this. But let's say we have something happen where the score and gets added 1 again. We'll say it equals score plus 1. And then down here, we'll console log again score, and now we get 2. Okay, so that's something that is very common using let. Now let's try the kind of the same thing with const. So we'll go ahead and say const, and I'll just call this x, and I'm going to set that to 100. And then let's say I want to take that x variable and then reassign it to 200. If I save that, I'm going to get an error. It says assignment to constant variable, a type error. Okay, so a constant cannot be directly reassigned like this. Another thing you can't do with const is just declare it and not initialize. So for instance, if I were to say, I already have score, so I'll say score 1. If I were to just do this, you'll see it's already giving me an error here. Const declarations must be initialized. If I save, I'm going to see the same error here. Okay, if this were a let, though, that I can do that. Okay, so just know that const can't be directly reassigned. Now, where a lot of people get confused is when you're using arrays or objects, things that are not primitive values. And I know I haven't gotten into that stuff yet, but I just want to show you a quick example that's pretty easy to understand. So if I use const and I have an array, right, and an array is just multiple values. So let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, all right. What I can't do is directly reassign by taking array and saying, well, let's do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If I do that, I'm going to get an error because I'm using the equal sign directly reassigning. But what I could do is with arrays, you have a bunch of methods such as push. And push is a method that will add on to the end. So what I could do is say array.push5, and then if I console log my array, that works. So I manipulated this array. I changed it from 1, 2, 3, 4 to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 by simply using a method to push 5 onto the end. Okay, and then the same goes with objects. If I say const person and I set that to an object and I say name Brad, and then we'll come down here. Now, if I were to just take person and directly reassignment, you guys know that's not going to work, but I could do person.name and set that equal to John, and that works because I'm not directly changing the variable. I'm changing a property or a key inside the variable, or not a key, but a value of a key. Okay, I could also do like person.email, and I could add on, let's say brad@gmail. Okay, and then if I do a console log of the entire person object, you'll see I have name John and email Brad. Okay, so when people ask me, what should I use, const, let, or both, or whatever, I say it's really preference. Now for me, I always use const unless I know I'm going to directly reassign something like this right here. Okay, now you're going to find that you don't do this very often. Okay, I shouldn't say that. I don't do this very often. We use a lot of the times we use objects and arrays, and using const with that is just fine because there's not too many, you don't directly reassign this very often. You're going to do stuff like this. You're going to use methods, you're going to assign properties and stuff like that. So that's my rules. I always use const unless I know it's something that I'm going to change, such as a score in a game. You might add to that. But you probably, or what I would do is have it in an object and then just change that value. So I could use const in that case. So, I mean, you're going to find a lot of this stuff as preference. All right, now another thing that I just wanted to mention is we can declare multiple, let's say multiple values at once, or multiple variables. So I'll just go ahead and say, actually let's use let here. Let's say let, and I'll say ABC. So I could do that, right? I don't even have to assign it because I'm using let. And then I could also do like const. I can't just, I have to assign it, but I still can do multiple at once. So I could say like A, I can't do A because I just used it up there, but let's say D equals 10. I could put a comma and say E equals 20, and let's say F equals 30. Okay, and all of that is just fine. So if I console log D, down here, you're going to see we get 10. Now, I usually don't do this. I'll just use a semicolon and then just do const D, const E, const F. I just think it looks cleaner, but that's just, again, that's just preference. But you can assign, you know, multiple at the same time. And if you don't actually assign a value and you log it, what we're going to get is undefined, okay, which is one of the data types, which is what we're going to talk about in the next video.